Hey you guys, welcome back to Tomes of Terror, and we're doing another book review today, just like we always do on this show. Now the one we're doing today, this is a little bit more of a novella really, it's kind of short. This one is called Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This actually came out in 2020, and I guess this was another one that wasn't on my TBR list, but it just kept coming up in my recommendations like on Amazon, and I kept seeing like other book channels covering it. And that and his other book, which I think they came out the same year, which was called The Only Good Indians, which I've also heard a lot of really good stuff about. But because this one was so short, and this is the first time that I'm reading anything by Stephen Graham Jones, I think I might have read some of his short stories because his name is very familiar. But so I wanted something that was kind of like short to see if I wanted to kind of go whole hog and read some of his other stuff. Even though from everything that I've heard, this one is not quite like some of the other stuff that he's written, but I don't know. I liked this one enough that I would definitely like read some more stuff of his. Now, the thing about this book is that it's so short. Like I said, I think it's only about 130 pages. You can easily read it in one sitting. It's so short that it's going to be really, really difficult for me to like talk about without spoiling it. And honestly, when I was reading the back of the blurb on the back, it kind of spoils one of the things anyway. So I really didn't think it was that big a deal. So like I said, if you want to read this, just like usual, if you don't want to know anything about it, which, as I said, that's the way I like to approach horror novels. I don't really even read the blurbs or anything. I just like see somebody recommended it and gives a sentence or two synopsis, and I'm just like, okay, that sounds good. So, and then I just like start reading it. But if you don't want to know anything about it, then go read it. It probably will only take you an hour or two, and then come back and we can talk about it, and we'll see what you thought about it. We can talk about it in the comments if you would like to. So this book is basically, it's in the first person, and we're hearing it in the voice of a teenage boy named Sawyer. So keep in mind, if you're not real into the writing style of this book, it's very much as though you're listening to a teenage boy talk. You know what I mean? It's almost kind of like, I saw another review that compared it to like somebody just, even like making a YouTube video or something like that, where he's like confessing all of this stuff that happens. So it's very conversational, very off the cuff. And so if you think, it took me a little bit, like a few pages to get into the writing style, you know what I mean? Just because it was so much like a teenager would talk. But after that, it didn't really bother me anymore. So keep in mind that if you don't really like that type of, conversational type of tone, then maybe this might not be your thing, but because that's how the whole thing is written. So you would think from the cover and from the title, it almost kind of seems like Stephen Graham Jones was trying to, I don't know if I'd necessarily say he's trying to like subvert like B-movie tropes, because the way that it was kind of marketed, the way that it sounds on the back of the book almost makes it sound like a slasher, which it kind of is, or like one of those B-movie, like big monster type of things. There's like, or a town gets overrun by living mannequins, or like Tourist Trap or something like that. That's the first thing I thought of was Tourist Trap, actually, which you should watch if you haven't seen it. It's actually really good. It's from the 70s. But the book is not really like that at all. As I said, it's sort of like a slasher, but it's kind of a psychological thing as well, with like some ambiguity to it. So what you have is like there's this small town, and there's this group of friends, both boys and girls, and they're all getting ready to, I guess this is going to be their last summer, after they graduate high school or whatever. So they're probably going to be separating. So you have this group, they've been friends for a really long time. Now, this one particular summer, before the events of the book, they found an old abandoned department store mannequin, like in a creek or something in the woods. And for a long time, they would kind of just wag this mannequin around and play pranks on the other townsfolk with it. That was like something that they were really fond of doing. But this last summer, I guess at this point, as I said, everyone's thinking about going off to college or moving away. And so they're not really thinking about the mannequin anymore. And the mannequin, who is named Manny, very uncreatively, has kind of been forgotten about. So he's kind of just in Sawyer's garage, like sitting on his dad's old motorcycle or whatever. But Sawyer decides that because this is their last summer together, he wants to pull one last prank, kind of bring the mannequin out of retirement and pull this one last prank on particularly his friend Shauna, who has just gotten a job at the local movie theater, but also on kind of like the manager of the movie theater, because he kicked some of the boys out for, sneaking in without paying, and they kind of wanted to get back at him for that. So what they decide to do is dress Manny up like a person, like you would, and put him in the movie theater, and then just kind of have him sit there, and then they're going to sit in the back and, and watch the hilarity ensue, like when the manager comes around looking for tickets, or when Shauna comes around and, sees that it's a mannequin and not a real person, and they think it's going to freak him out, and so they think that's really funny. Now, what ends up happening, so they do this. I love, like, all the stuff about where they're trying to sneak the mannequin into the movie theater, which, obviously that's kind of hard to do. And they have to sort of cut it into pieces, you know what I mean? Like take it apart, cut it into pieces, and like put it in their backpacks and whatnot. And then they have to sort of reassemble it, like in the front row. So they do all that. They put clothes on it and they put it in there. So the prank seems to be going swimmingly. The usher comes around to look at this person's ticket, but nothing happens, as I think they bought it a ticket, but then they like put it in his pocket or something. And it looked like the guy that was going around checking the tickets, like looked at the lap and then just kept on going, like nothing was weird. And they were like, well, that's really unusual. And they thought that their prank was kind of, going to go over like a wet fart or whatever. And then something really weird happens. After the movie is over, the mannequin apparently gets up and walks out like a regular person. So from this point forward, Sawyer becomes convinced that Manny, the mannequin, has come to life and is essentially punishing his friends for forgetting about him. Because as I said, they used to take him everywhere and pull all kinds of pranks with him. So he's kind of like given it agency and given it life in his head. Now, not too long after this, their friend Shauna, the girl who works at the movie theater, is killed along with some of her family members in this really horrific, like freak accident, like a truck like drives through the front of their house or whatever. Even the dogs get killed and they're all just like turned into complete mush. And because of this freak accident, he becomes convinced that Manny, the mannequin, is going around killing each of his friends one by one and also killing their families, like in revenge. And he even has these other ideas that Manny is going around, because I guess there's kind of a rash in the neighborhood of people's kind of sheds and stuff being broken into. And then the only thing stolen is, bags of fertilizer. So he gets the idea that Manny is eating fertilizer and that he's growing up to like kaiju size. So he's like a Godzilla mannequin. So the more the story goes on, the more this scenario becomes more complicated in his mind. And to him, it's logical that because Shauna and her whole entire family were wiped out, presumably by Manny, the mannequin, he thinks that by killing all his friends himself, that he will spare the family members. Because to him, he figures, well, it's bad that, 4 or 5 teenagers have to die. But, if I don't do this, then Manny will wipe out all of their families. And that's even more people. So he thinks he's being a hero. So there's like a thread through there, because there's a thread too about the movie that they see at the beginning where they first do the prank. It's like some superhero movie, which is supposed to be like a Marvel movie, but he doesn't call it that, but that's what he's referring to. And then it seems like every subsequent event that's like significant to the story has something to do with that movie. Like, Shauna was like downloading it when the truck crashed into the house. There's a scene at a drive-in where it's also playing. So it kind of becomes wrapped up in his mind that movie, that he's being a superhero in a way that he's doing something he doesn't really want to do, or something difficult for a greater good. That's kind of like what his thinking is. So as I said, the thing about this is that Sawyer, pretty much from the outset, and like I said, this is a spoiler review, so don't complain. I told you that at the beginning. But Sawyer is essentially an unreliable narrator. Obviously, or I guess they kind of leave it ambiguous at the end. I'm not really sure. But or obviously Manny has not grown to Godzilla size and is like wiping all these people out. This is Sawyer just making up this story in his head and using these weird events happening in the town to sort of feed into this narrative that he's constructed to give him justification for killing all his friends. Presumably, although this isn't stated outright, but this is what I got from it anyway, because he was upset that all of his friends were going to be leaving him. So I think that's why he sort of projected those feelings onto Manny. Like, you know, we forgot about him in the garage, and, you know, he wants to kill us all because, you know, we used to hang out. He was our best friend. And, you know, now everyone's leaving and forgot about him. So I kind of feel like those were his feelings, but he was projecting that onto the mannequin, because as the story goes on, you know, he starts killing, like picking off his friends, he starts wearing like a mannequin mask, you know, almost like he's, you know, doing the work of the mannequin, because he thinks that if he doesn't do it, then the mannequin is going to kill more people. I saw this one review earlier, and this was actually a pretty astute observation. I can't remember what her name was, but she was reviewing this book as well. And she said this actually kind of gave her the vibe of, like, remember that case where those two little girls like thought that they had to kill their friend for Slender Man, otherwise Slender Man was going to wipe out their whole families. It's kind of like that. But as I said, this is all from Sawyer's point of view. Even though you can say, oh, it's not all that believable that someone would come to believe that a mannequin had come to life and had grown to giant size and was going to wipe out. I mean, the fact that it did happen in real life in the Slender Man case, albeit, you know, those kids were much younger than this boy is supposed to be. He's supposed to be 17 or 18 years old. But he's obviously got mental issues. So the fact that he just develops this really complicated scenario about this mannequin, just, you know what I mean? So it is unbelievable, but in a way, not. You know what I'm saying? I actually really, really enjoyed this book. Like I said, it took me a couple pages to get into the groove of the writing style, because as I said, it's very casual, it's very off the cuff, very conversational, and it's just like a teenager would talk. So you have to kind of have to vibe with it, and it takes a couple pages to do that. It's kind of short, so you don't really get to know any of the other characters all that well. You're basically just seeing them through Sawyer's perception, because he's the one talking about it. Also, at the end, I will say that I think I want to say that they left it ambiguous that Manny wasn't real, you know, that he wasn't really walking around. But in a way, they kind of don't. I mean, Stephen Graham Jones, I don't know. He doesn't really explain, well, then why did Sawyer, because I think I remember from the beginning that it wasn't just Sawyer that saw Manny ostensibly get up and walk out of the theater. So it doesn't really explain why they saw that or what happened to the mannequin subsequently, unless he just kind of imagined that whole scenario. I'm not really sure. So they do kind of leave that a little bit vague. There was kind of a little bit of a thing at the end where one character you thought was dead is still alive. You know, so, but I didn't really mind that. Like, some people didn't really like that plot twist or whatever, but I didn't mind it. But yeah, this is just a really fun, it's like a slasher, and it's funny, but it's also kind of like a little bit grim and a little bit like kind of disturbing. But I don't know, it's hard to explain. It's just like a really funny slasher, but it has like a lot of psychological kind of shit to it too. And it's like, you know, if you like unreliable narrators, if you kind of like, you know, just like a fun, quick, I don't want to say it's kind of a breezy read, you know, it's really fun. Like I said, it's maybe not what you're expecting. It's not like an army of mannequins like coming down the town or anything like that. It's not like that at all. It's basically just like this one kid and his, you know, spiraling psychosis as he like imagines that this mannequin is killing these people. But it's still fun and it's still funny. It's like got a really dark sense of humor, and it's pretty gruesome. It had like some of the kills were pretty gruesome and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed it, and it didn't really take me all that long to read. So if you're looking to get into Stephen Graham Jones, because as I said, he's written several books. His recent one was called The Only Good Indians, which, like I said, I want to read that too, because that's gotten like a really lot of good reviews. But it's significantly longer than this one. But yeah, so it's called Night of the Mannequins, and pretty cheap, pretty short. So if you are in the mood for something like that, then by all means check it out. And I will see you on the next one. Bye.